Hey, this is Ed Billings in Chapel Hill, North Carolina.
And Jefi Moultrie in San Diego, California.
And we are coming to you with Messy in the Middle. And we realized if you've been listening to us over the past year, we're coming up on, which is pretty crazy. Yeah. There's a book that we reference a lot, and it's Chris Voss's Never Split the Difference. Mm-hmm. We've talked a lot about that in different contexts, and we thought today would be a great opportunity to dig into some of the details on it on a dedicated episode.
Yeah, I think it's great.
Yeah, so we're going to do that today. And, why it's important and why are we sharing this? We realized if everybody kind of had this toolkit, negotiations would go a lot smoother.
Yeah. No ego involved.
No ego involved. And we would just kind of get to resolution quicker. So we really encourage people to read it and try and apply it. And it's not about having a leg up on somebody. It's about really understanding communication and how to resolve things and negotiate from a good position. So that's what we're going to do today. So Jeff, I think you were going to kind of ask questions and go through it a little bit.
Yep, I sure am. So let's talk about, well, first of all, there's so many things we could talk about with this. Like I'll call Ed and go, hey, I'm getting ready to negotiate a new contract with my brokerage, and you would help me walk through some stuff. Or, I can't even think of the 100 times I've called you and we've actually utilized this book.
Yeah.
And not only that, you took another class. What was the class?
So it was on Backstory. It was a real estate specific course that the Black Swan Group, which is Chris Voss, the author's company, held. And we met once a month and we went through the techniques and applied them in real estate examples in our practices. Sure. And it was fantastic. So you're right. There are so many different applications from negotiating listing agreements with clients, buyer's agency expectations, actual contract negotiations, repair negotiations, where you're going to go to dinner with your spouse. There's all kinds of ways you can use this.
Well, do you want to talk about like the book's principles and how you can apply them, or where do you think the best place to start is?
Yeah, I think the jumping off point is really the real premise is that if you follow these negotiation tips, they can be applied to where you can get resolution quicker. And we're going to dive into some big categories. Okay. There's a lot we could talk about, and we'll probably do some follow-ups on this. But it's what we're going to look at today is active listening, and we're going to go into that.
Okay.
Tactical empathy.
Okay. I love the way that sounds.
The accusation audit, which is a fun one. And then the power of no. So that's really what we're going to dive into today, are those four blocks. So shall we go into active listening?
Yep, let's do that one first.
Okay, so the way that Chris Voss in the book defines active listening, it's a process of fully concentrating on, understanding, responding to, and remembering what is being said.
Oh my God, now Cody's going to be like, you need to listen better.
We all do. Because
we do.
So listening it takes concentration, and it's an active thing. And the reality of what most people do, especially in negotiations, is they're thinking about their counter.
Agreed.
They're hearing, and then they're preparing their argument.
Yeah.
And that is not what active listening is.
Right.
So it's really a focused effort to try and aim to understand. And on background on this a little bit, Chris Voss was an FBI hostage negotiator.
That's right. I remember reading that in the book. That was really interesting.
And so these are techniques that he was on the forefront of developing to get people out alive with the bad guys. And it's really, really powerful in the book. It's great reading, just as like the situations he was in, but then it all reinforces the principles. And so what he realized is that you really had to listen to these folks and understand what was going on.
So would that kind of be the mindset of discovery? Is that piece?
It is. When you go
Okay.
in, when you're having a negotiation with someone, and that's at any point, but especially at the start, you want to have a mindset of discovery,
Okay.
not getting angry or trying to think about what you're going to say to counter their point, but really try to understand, where is this coming from? What, and the deeper you can go in that, the better. If you can really get into the emotional piece and kind of understand and probe that far, and that takes some time, but it's really, it's an opportunity for discovery.
Right.
And so go ahead.
There's the three things, right? How, what, and why. Are those the things that lead into that discovery space?
Yeah, it's open-ended questions.
Open-ended, okay.
So open-ended questions will lead to that, to get people to, well, there are a few things. So one of the things is asking open-ended questions. Okay. So those are how, what, why, questions that are probing and not yes, no questions. When you ask a question that ends in a yes or no, you can answer it. That doesn't open it up for discussion. So you're trying to, well, how, I understand that I'm looking here in your offer that you have a really short contingency period.
Right.
Why is that?
My buyer's not approved yet, actually. So. I want to get this offer in really fast.
Yes. Oh, your buyer's not approved. So, but
just kidding.
But it's that type of thing, and going through to really try and understand and asking those questions. So that's one technique. Is leaning into open-ended questions.
Yeah.
The second is mirroring.
Oh.
Yeah, so mirroring. So, I'm gonna show an example of that now. So,
okay.
Jefi, what did you do this morning?
I went for a bike ride.
You went for a bike ride?
I did. It was great.
It was great. Tell me about it.
Well, I rode with some of my greatest friends. And I rode 50 miles, and it was just nice to be out in the sunshine finally.
Nice to be out in the sunshine.
Yeah, I can see how this mirroring thing might get me irritated.
Well, it's coming. But when you do it a little more naturally, it'll get people to go through and further explain what they're doing. So
so time out.
Mm-hmm.
So the mirroring is to actually allow the other person to go deeper without you leading them. Is that what it is? Okay.
Right.
That makes sense.
When you repeat the last three words back, because that's a common mirror technique of someone when they're talking, and then actually stopping and using a little bit of silence there, that'll encourage them to continue on.
Gotcha.
And go deeper. And then you just you continue to listen. So you're trying to understand a little bit more around the situation. So an example would be if you asked, in our market, I see that on this offer, they only have a $2,000 due diligence amount. And I started to talk about that. You could repeat some of that back to where I'm really getting at the real reason for why they're doing it.
Right.
It might not be, they may have a concern about the condition of the property. Maybe they just don't have that much cash laying around, and they've got to conserve that. So it's a way to continue the conversation to try and understand more of what's going on.
That makes sense.
So as you do that, then the next technique in active listening is you start to label.
Okay.
And so labeling really relies on using phrases like "it sounds like," "it seems like," "it feels like."
Okay. So when I first met Ed, he would ask me questions, and he's, "Gosh, Jefi, it really just seems like you're struggling today with this client." And I'm like, "Yeah, man, I am." And so over the time that I've gotten to know him, I'm like, wait a minute. You're Chris Vossing me right now.
Well, I think I do that
work.
naturally. I do that naturally,
so.
but it is.
I think so too.
But it is a technique. It's a way to help build rapport and to frame things, so that you can, as you start to hear it now, as you label it, you're putting it into the context of where you think it is. And if you're wrong, they're going to tell you. Mm-hmm. And if they're right, they're going to let you know too. And usually, you're right, or you've labeled it correctly when they say that's right, not you're right. That's right.
Okay, and they obviously feel heard.
Yes, and you'll see that, like if you're watching something on TV and you agree with it, like if you're watching some political show or something, or somebody makes a statement. And if you agree with it, you'll say, that's right. People will naturally do that.
Say that's right.
I
think of the three things we've talked about here. This is the piece I feel is the most important, really, because it's where, and I do this naturally as well. I just don't use these words, but it's bringing someone in so that they know that you understand them, which is all part of negotiating in the first place, because a lot of times people negotiate things they don't really want to negotiate. They just want to win. Right. So this is kind of where you can get in there. You can get into their little head and figure out what's going on. So I like that part.
Yeah. So you could say, well, it seems like your client's concerned about the amount of cash they actually have on hand and putting too much into the transaction, or it feels like you're concerned about the overall condition of the property and you need a long contingency period. Mm-hmm. Oh, that's right. Well, no, that's not it. Right. So then you're on this path of discovery to understand what their true motivations are. Right. And if you really get deep on it, you can get into some of the psychological reasons that they'll start to give up. And I thought about this, like for me, buying the best location is really, really important.
Right.
That's kind of a trigger for me. And it comes from a couple of different places. One, when I was in commercial, I was trained that way. Mm-hmm. So it really resonates with me. But if you go even deeper emotionally, I grew up in a neighborhood where we were like the nicest house on the street. And I saw the effects of that long-term in my family's investment. So that really resonates with me. There's some deep emotional reasons why I always encourage my clients, let's buy the best location you can afford. You don't want to be the most expensive in the house, all that stuff. Right.
Right.
So if you can tap into that and know that about me, if you were showing me property, you know that I like the home that needs some work, that's in a really good location.
Right.
And there's some deep emotional reasons for that.
Mm-hmm. Yep. It makes, again, I keep saying the same thing over and over. That makes sense. It does.
Yeah, it does make sense.
Do you want to dive in a little deeper on the active listening, or do you want to move to tactical empathy?
I think we can move to tactical empathy, which is the second subject, and it's really an extension of active listening. Okay,
define it for me.
So it's the importance in building rapport and trust is kind of where it goes. And what that's based on is understanding the feelings and the mindset of another in the moment and hearing what is behind those feelings so you can increase your influence in the moments that follow.
I think every married couple should read this book. And I'm going to start with me. Because honestly, I mean, this is all great for business, but holy crap, this is so good for just relationships, right?
Oh, it's all, it all applies.
All tied together.
It's really understanding. You don't necessarily have to agree, but if you have tactical empathy, it's going to allow you to understand where they're coming from and address that. And one of the examples they give in the book is they're negotiating with they're in a high-rise apartment and they're coming to kind of do a home invasion type thing, and they're barricaded and they're worried about that they're going to kill everybody.
Yeah.
And all they're doing is standing at the door saying, it seems like you don't want to go back to jail. It seems like you're worried you're going to kill us. Those are like
Yeah.
and they just kept repeating that. And that
Yeah.
disarmed the whole situation. And when they did the post interview with the bad guys, they said, yeah, you guys weren't going to go away. And we were convinced that we were going to not get killed if we came out, because he kept saying that. And that's what our number one concern was. So they had tactical empathy with that, and they applied it. So it's really understanding where they're coming from and trying to develop that sense of it. So you may want the new roof on the house. I don't have to agree that that you're going to get it, but I need to understand what's going on there.
Right.
Do you think we're being greedy? Do you think we're trying to take advantage of you? What are these things? And trying to understand that position of where they're coming from.
Yeah, this is interesting because I have a client who's extremely sensitive to how she feels in a location. Does she feel safe? Does she feel like because her husband travels so much that she would be comfortable, walking down the street to go to the grocery store? Does she feel good in her, like, is she going to sleep well at night? And when I was asking these questions, you find that it's easier for me to help her and serve her to find the best place for her, knowing that, because I can do that next layer of discovery of, what is the crime rate here? What does happen after 12 p.m.? You're building this. I don't know if this is the same tactical empathy thing, but I do think it's the same in my mind. Would you agree?
Yeah. Because you're going deeper to understand what's really behind there. And you might, where you run into it is you might think it's safe to you,
right?
But you have to have empathy, tactical empathy for your client in this case, of what's important to them, and then serving them in that way. So it does relate to it.
Yes.
But these skills and probing techniques and summaries are all kind of going toward building that. And when you have that, you're going to get resolution in your negotiations quicker.
Okay. So, the accusation audit.
One of my favorites, because it's so counterintuitive. So,
of course, I have a favorite.
So, the accusation audit, defined in the book, it's a summary of all the objections the other side is going to have. It's what they're thinking, but they're not saying. Okay, so it's there, it's in the room, and the goal is to get the objections out on the table to lower the stress level.
Okay,
and then see the benefit, and then eventually see the benefit of like taking your position.
Okay.
So it's all that stuff that's there, and you just get it out. And I love
it. So request for repairs, that would be a good one.
Okay. So here's an example of how I use that. I use this one all the time.
I'm sure I should take some notes here really quick.
And we're going to get into the power no, and I'm going to use it in this example, and we'll talk more about what no does. But I'd say something like, hey, we've received your repair request, and I'd like to discuss it with you. So I'm talking to the other agent, right?
Yeah.
So Jefi, so is now a bad time?
No, now's a good time.
Great. Well, Jefi, I'm about to make your day really difficult.
Oh, great.
You're going to feel like my seller's being greedy. It's going to seem like we don't care about the condition of the home we're selling. But the reality is we really want to find a way to work with you to resolve this problem. Would it be okay or would it be a problem if I outlined our perspective right now?
No, that's fine. I see what you're doing here. You got me to say no twice.
Yeah, I did, didn't I? So now you're in control.
Right.
You're in control of the situation.
You're about to
I'm just going to lay
sock it to me.
I'm just going to lay it out, but I've prepared you, and the reality is what I'm about ready to tell you is not going to be as bad as you think it is. But now you're like, you've been able to clear the channel.
Mm-hmm. I'm prepared for something terrible.
You're prepared for something terrible. I've told you you're going to think we're greedy. So that's kind of gone.
Yeah.
And then odds are so your mind is racing to how bad it's going to be.
Mm-hmm.
And the reality is I'm probably going to lay up underneath that and you're going to feel okay about it. And then, and then away we go. So it's a really good technique.
I actually like this, and you helped me with this when I was doing my negotiation for my contract, it's so funny because you're saying it to me. I'm like, that's never gonna work.
It works.
And it totally works. So that's really cool. This is something that I think you should practice with somebody. If you're really interested in this accusation audit, I think it's great to learn and have it start. It's just part of who you are when you're communicating, because at this point and how much you have practiced this book, it just comes naturally for you. It does not seem forced.
Right.
Where for me, I think that when I was using it, it felt a little forced because it wasn't my nature. But it's delivery. Incredible tool. Yeah, absolutely.
It's delivery. And part of it is like, if you sound scripted, it's not going to work. If you sound tense, it's not going to work. And you notice the tone I took with you on that was pretty relaxed.
Right.
And it's
you're going to think that I'm just greedy. You're going to think this is going to be the worst day of your life.
Yeah. This is going to be terrible.
Right. But you do say, is this a bad time? And I said no, as opposed to yes. So you're giving me the power to say no.
That's right. And that's the next topic we're going to go into. And this is really a good one, and is the power of no. So when you position your questions to someone so that they can say no, you're giving them the power. Okay. And it creates a sense of safety and security. And what happens is that a lot of old school sales technique was completely opposite of that. It's like, set up this dialogue to where you're getting yeses and you're building these, yes responses, and you're going to get to yes. Well, everybody's onto that. It feels cheesy. It feels manipulative. And it quite frankly, it's useless. And it's an overused technique. And no one wants to feel like they're, stalked or trapped, or being stalked or being trapped. Right. And so what I try to do is position things to where you're asking for permission, through no. So you're giving them that opportunity to say no. And maybe I'll give you an example of how maybe people can relate to. So let's pretend that, you were sitting in a bar and the seat next to you was available. So you're there, and some guy comes up to you and says, "Hey, is this seat empty? Can I sit next to you?"
Sure.
Okay. All right. So you said sure. How'd that make you feel?
I'm gonna go like this.
Yeah, that's right. So you said yes, but you felt like a little.
I felt like I didn't have an What am I gonna do? Tell him no?
Yeah. So now the flip side is, if somebody came up to you and said, "Hey, is this seat taken?"
No.
Would it be an issue if I sat next to you?
No. Oh yeah, it feels totally different. That is so funny.
Yeah, look at your tone.
I know.
You didn't realize you were doing that, but you're like,
no.
Now and then now
he took me off the defense.
You're off the defense. Now you're in control.
Yeah.
And so what I've noticed is, and how you apply this, if I'm calling somebody, I've changed after going through this training. I changed my talk track to where I always say is now a bad time, rather than, hey, is this a good time? Because, and you can hear it come through the phone. People are like, oh, no, it's not a bad time at all. Or they'll tell you, I'm going into a meeting. I'm like, no problem. Just let me know when I can reach out. Just call them to say, hey, or whatever it is, or whatever it is, if we're negotiating or in an issue, just say, no problem. Just let me know when I can reach out.
Yeah, you're right. It's so crazy. Each time we went through those three, I thought one was better than the other, but they really are all equally important.
Yeah. They all kind of interrelate.
Yes.
So, it's the other one. I'll tell you a great technique with this one is if you're at an impasse
Mm-hmm.
on a negotiation, if you ask, are you ready to give up on trying to make this deal work?
Mm-hmm. No.
People, no, we want to make this work. Okay, well now, I've given you the power. Well, let's explore.
Yeah.
And that's a really good one too. When you're kind of in an impasse, you're asking like, are you ready to quit?
Yeah. Of course they're going to say, no, I'm not
Of course,
ready to quit.
I don't want to quit.
Yeah.
Right.
Wow.
So it's good stuff. And I think that's probably as deep as we want to go on this one.
Yeah. We could spend 3 hours talking about this dang book.
And we'll come back. Well, I'm sure we'll come back with some little more direct things on this, but we encourage everybody, read the book, look for examples on how to use it. It's going to improve your negotiation, and on all sides, you're going to get to resolution quicker.
Love it. Thanks, Ed. I really appreciate you sharing this one. This was good.
Yep.